none. I don't think there's going to be too much. And we'll just approve the agenda by consensus, move on to the adoption of the minutes. Everybody's been through the minutes. Anything that you think you'd like to change in there or have a question about? I don't see any hands, so we will adopt the minutes by consensus. Taking us into public comments, Steph? No, okay, thank you. And move right into updates. And did Allison, oh, there's Allison, good, okay, great. And so Liam Edwards, Chief Administration Officer, Gillian Drake, Manager, Rec and Community Services, and Sam Collins, Project Manager. So I'll just pass it over to you guys and see where we end up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to give a brief project status update for folks, and if anybody has any questions, they can ask. And then Jackie's going to give a very brief update on fundraising grant application status, and then we'll be moving to a close thereafter. So the project, as you will have noticed, is still in the earth moving phase, and we're well into the blasting rock phase of the project, and you will have seen that the primary excavation for the basement and the large multi-purpose room is actually completed. That's the big excavation that you notice driving by. Really what's left to do is what they're calling sort of fine blasting. I'm not sure how fine you can get with blasting, but I guess that's possible. And there's some trenching blasting required for some utilities. And framing is supposed to begin this week for the
Forms.
For the forms for the footings and the primary foundation in that big excavated area. So they will be starting the form work while continuing with some of the blasting. And one of the other elements that has to be completed too is the remaining overburden for the road area that's right along the fence line still needs to be completely dug up, and that there'll be a trench that gets blasted if it needs to be blasted underneath the road area where the septic field conveyance pipe will flow from the center. So things are moving along quite well there, and there doesn't seem to be any significant delays that we're experiencing, and so far so good, so to speak. One of the things that I've been making really clear to the project team and the site super is that if there is any additional blast rock, rather than trying to bury it on site, like by bringing elevations up, we want any available rock for the fire hall project, because we still have some elevation to increase at the fire hall project, and we actually have at least 100 truckloads of material that's required at the fire hall. And so if anything that we can get from on island or from ourselves is beneficial. And so I'll pause there on the status of the construction, see if Sam or anybody wanted to add anything, or if anyone has any questions.
I don't mind adding a stat or two if it's helpful. We're at a claimed point of 6.3% complete construction in terms of a percentage. We're almost at our first million spend, not quite, but almost. And there's been 3 changes to date. One of them's a credit, and 2 of them are for some minor civil scopes of work. So fairly smooth, although lots of coordination and collaboration in play to avoid, as Liam put it, delays or change management processes. So lots of change management in play.
Super. Thank you, Sam. That's great news.
One thing I wanted to add too is on the reporting front is we are meeting this Friday, Sam and his team and our team internally here to talk about some of the tracking, some of the metrics that we want to track more finely, and how we want to report those metrics back to the provincial government, back to this committee, and back to council. And so we're hoping that in the near future, after that meeting, that we'll have some crisper reports that we're going to be able to share with everybody, to be able to track the percentage complete from a cost perspective, where we are at on the schedule, where we're at with drawdown on contingencies, where we're at with changes, and all of those types of things.
Yeah, great idea. Super. Is that it for the construction update then?
Yep.
Okay, thank you all. And we'll move on to the fundraising update. Jacqueline Massey, fundraising coordinator. Hi, Jackie.
So as Liam mentioned, I'll just keep this brief. So we are continuing working as a team on a number of fronts, including development of a revised fundraising strategy, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a while. Of course, the priority remains the Cultural Spaces Grant, preparing the grant application summary as a preliminary step before submitting the formal application. And that was, if you'll recall, requested by the program manager at Canadian Heritage. So this, along with our cash flow forecast, will help them advise us on submission of looking at multi-year funding request, recognizing that we can only claim for expenses that we've already incurred. So as previously reported, we are breaking out the infrastructure and construction costs, as well as specialized equipment costs of those spaces that will be programmed for arts and cultural activities. And in doing this, we updated a forecast of annual programming for the community center, for the entire center, but looking at those spaces that would be used for arts and cultural activities. And, Gillian and I and Jamie can just report that we attest that the facility will be a very busy place based on that programming scheme schedule. We are continuing to develop communications and engagement with donors and general public about the project, including calling in outstanding pledges. And in terms of the pledges that we had collected, adding up to the 1.3 or 1.29 million, we've received about 80% of those pledges to date. We've also been exploring a process of receiving shares and other securities as gifts. So moving on that front. And of course, we're continuing with our seat sponsorship sale, our campaign, I should say. And at this point, we've got about 20 seats now spoken for.
Good.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. If there's any questions. Yeah.
Anybody have a question out there? All right. Well, that's great. Thank you, Jackie. And we'll move on to new business, which is to move to a closed meeting. And the recommendation is that the Community Center Select Steering Committee move to a closed meeting pursuant to Section 90, Section 1 of the Community Charter. And I will move that. Second to, okay, David.